The LA Clippers don't have the most storied history, but they do have some great playoff games in recent history. Enough that all the best games in Clipper history are really playoff games. And in this episode, I'm going to do it. I think it's about time. The top 5 games in Clipper history. And spoiler alert, I was alive and watching every single one of them on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day. I am your host, diehard Clipper fan for 18 years, Darian Vaziri. Also on Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod. Got my own YouTube channel and podcast where I talk LA sports, NBA history, and Clipper basketball. And today, I'm going to be talking about Clipper basketball and Clipper history. And yes, you might laugh when you hear Clipper history. No rings, no finals appearances, once known as the worst franchise in NBA history, as we talked about on these episodes. If you haven't checked out the episode with Jason, who's an NBA historian, we talked about the difference between the way Donald Sterling owned the Clippers versus Steve Ballmer, and it was a really insightful episode for those that don't know where the Clippers came from in terms of their background and whatnot. But in this episode, we're going to keep it simple. An episode I definitely wanted to get off before the season, just kind of being able to be a fan and just recount my experiences or recall my experiences to you, probably a Clipper fan or just an NBA fan that can probably relate to having these great memories, unless your ticket prices or wherever your team is, or well, I should say, if you're not close to a team, NBA team, I'm sorry, because it's the best thing ever if you love basketball. And if your team's ticket prices are just too expensive, well, that's one of the perks of being a Clipper fan, even though there are many cons as well. So I've been blessed to go to so many great Clipper games, so many NBA games in general, but so many great playoff games because the Clipper tickets have been so affordable. So shout out to the Clippers and their poor history for making it affordable for a person like myself to go to these games. So I'm going to be talking about my 5 favorite, or should I say, the greatest Clipper games in the history of their franchise. And the criteria for that is this. And I'll also be doing my honorable mention who just missed the cut, or which games missed the cut at the end. But this is my criteria. How much it meant in the moment, and of course how I look back on it, how I reflect on it. And by the way, if you think there are any regular season games that are going to get in on this list, or even in the honorable mention, you're mistaken, because, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Our top 10 games in the history of the franchise should definitely all be playoff games. I mean, you can point to Blake Griffin's first game against Portland, or even the first game we played with Chris Paul against the Golden State Warriors on Christmas Day of the lockout season, or even the first game with Kawhi against the Lakers in 2019. The energy was just crazy that night. It sounded on TV, just the split fan base in the stadium. But the 10 games I went with are all playoff games, and it's such a blessing because 10 years ago I would not have probably been able to do that, of put together a list of the best 5 Clipper games in history, but 10 if you count honorable mention, and they're all playoff games. So that shows that the Clippers have had some really memorable playoff games, some that have given us heart attacks, and I'm going to be recounting those stories right here. So let's start with number 5. 2006 Game 5 against the Denver Nuggets. Now, for those that don't know, and I plan on making a future episode very shortly on the '06 Clippers, because I think the Clippers of '06 are the most underrated team the Clippers have ever had. You could argue those Danny Manning '90s teams, but the Clippers gained so many fans during Lob City and are continuing to gain fans now in the Steve Ballmer era. But that was when it was still not cool to be a Clipper fan. That's the team that got me into the Clippers. So I have a little personal bias towards them, but at the same time, I think this, objectively speaking, I think this game belongs in the top 5 because it's the first time the Clippers ever made it out of the first round. The first time the Clippers ever won a playoff series. And that whole year, you could sense that the Clippers were going to win a series probably, but it was really all dependent on the matchup because that West was loaded. And the Clippers, allegedly, even though I fully believe it, tanked on purpose in some way by losing to the Memphis Grizzlies late in the season to get matched up with the Denver Nuggets in the first round. And at the time, the NBA still had those weak division rules where if you finished the top of your division, even if your record was worse, you had a higher seed. So the Denver Nuggets were the 3rd seed with a lower record than even the Lakers. It was like 41-41. The Lakers ended up being the 7th seed. The Denver Nuggets were the 3 seed, and the Nuggets were 44-38. I just checked. The Lakers were 45-37. The Clippers were 47-35. So the Clippers by record were actually the 5th best team in the Western Conference, but they finished 6th knowing that they'd have home court advantage in the first round against the Denver Nuggets. So going into that series, and by the way, I was only a 7-year-old kid if you're wondering, but it's the first year that I can remember everything in terms of what was going on. Now, could I break the game down like this? Know the X's and O's? Absolutely not. But I remember every big moment as well as fans that were a couple years older than me. And I remember this game very vividly. I remember what room in my old apartment I was watching the game in. And you know what's funny? I was being a brat. My mom came back from work like 30 minutes before the game. Or should I say maybe 45 minutes before the game started. And at the time, I'm living on the west side of LA, so we still got to take a long trip down the 10 to get to the 10 freeway, for those that are not from LA, to get to Staples Center in traffic. And I was not trying to show up to a playoff game late. I was really OCD when I was a little kid about I want to get there for the intro. I used to love the introductions. I want to hear the road team get its name called and everything. And my mom was like, this could be tickets available on Ticket Exchange or something. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not trying to sit in the nosebleeds and arrive late. I regret that decision a lot. It would have been great to be in the building because the energy was just incredible. The Clippers went on a huge run in the second half and sealed the win and the series victory. And I just posted some clips on Twitter, so go check me out on Twitter to see what I'm talking about. And by the way, the Clippers actually posted a great YouTube video of extended highlights of this game during the pandemic that's still on the YouTube channel. So really go check that out if you're a Clipper fan that wasn't around during this time. But Sam Cassell, Elton Brand, Cuttino Mobley, Chris Kaman, and Quentin Ross, Corey Maggette, Sean Livingston, and Vladimir Ivanovic, the 8 real rotation players for that team. So thankful for them. Unbelievable. They were much better than Denver. Elton Brand was unstoppable. He was just, rebounding, defense, his mid-range, his post-game. The Clippers had 4 guys in that starting lineup that could post up. Sam Cassell and Cuttino Mobley used to post up. You just don't have little guards doing that anymore. Sam Cassell was a beast. Cuttino Mobley, I was watching the highlights today, the extended highlights. My goodness, his shot making was unbelievable. You don't have that many guys 6'4" playing the way he was and shooting or should I say scoring in the variety of ways in which he was scoring. Turnarounds in the post over both shoulders, between the legs, pull up bank shots coming down the court. It was incredible. But that's my number 5. It was very special. Number 4. And you might be surprised that this is number 4, but I have reasoning for it. And it's the greatest comeback in NBA history, the 31-point comeback against the Warriors. It was just unbelievable. A stacked Warriors team, arguably the most stacked team in the history of the NBA relative to their competition. KD, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. And for 2 games before he got hurt, it may have been he got hurt in the first game. It was either game 1 or 2 he got hurt, but DeMarcus Cousins as well. But it wasn't the same DeMarcus Cousins. So really the big 4, they still had Sean Livingston, Andre Iguodala, and my God, that was just an unbelievable night. Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, pick and roll, City, Danilo Gallinari in on the act, Patrick Beverley. The Warriors just took the Clippers for granted. It's point blank simple. They took them for granted. Clippers snuck up on them. It was a gritty team. Amazing win. I was in college at the time, watching the game on East Coast time. and just trying not to wake all my housemates up, but just jumping around. It was nuts. I was watching with some of my friends that were one Celtics fan, one Laker fan. It was amazing. I remember walking around campus the next day. Lou Williams might as well have been Michael Jordan to me because he was just unreal. And the reason why, as great as that game was, the reason why I don't have it higher on this list is because you just knew we still weren't going to win the series. It was amazing. It just signified how gritty and how great that team was, that it wasn't a fluke they made the playoffs at all, even though they didn't have a clear-cut star. But man, after the Tobias Harris trade, Lou Williams was playing like an all-star. He was taking over games in the fourth quarter, and he did no differently in that game, in game 2. And of course, how could you forget Landry Shamit's open three? Gilgeous-Alexander, Shamet for 3, bingo! I mean, come on, that's one of Ralph Lawler's most famous calls, and it came in his last season as a broadcaster. That game is unbelievable, but you just knew we weren't going to win the game. And you might be asking, isn't this top 5 games in Clipper history? Yes, but the feeling after the game was great, but it was like, okay, are we going to even win another game in this series? Maybe one. And I'm still shocked that the Clippers won a game at Oracle Arena for the other game they won in the series. They couldn't win a game at Staples Center, which sucks. I wasn't in LA, so I didn't go to those games, and I'm happy I didn't because a couple of reasons. The prices, one, and the amount of bandwagon Warriors fans, obviously in addition to the Warriors fans from Northern California or the ones that live here in Los Angeles, but mixed with the bandwagon fans and the Curry and KD fanboys, that might have just raised my blood pressure to a point of no return if I had gone to those games. But the second they put Andre Iguodala on Lou Williams, it was kind of a wrap. He just got over screens, and his length was just too much for Lou to handle, and it was a struggle after game 2. But game 5, you still had another great experience with that 2019 team, winning another game at Oracle. Just unbelievable. But that's my number 4. And coming up, we're going to get to the top 3. What are your predictions? And by the way, in the comment section, remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, because that's the fastest way to grow the channel. And when you subscribe, I want you to comment underneath your personal top 5 games in Clipper history. And before we get to my top 3, we got some things to say from Bet Online. Ladies and gentlemen, the Clippers are -3 to win, -3 on opening night against the Lakers. So that means if the Clippers win by 4 or more, that you win that bet. And I would smash that bet because I believe the Clippers are going to win that game. And hopefully they'll win by more than 3. But I predict that they will. I think everyone's going to be fired up. And Ty Lue's track record against the Lakers is pretty good. 8-0 to be exact. Remember, BetOnline is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs, but also your pro and college basketball betting needs. Find all of the latest league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening games, Clippers-Lakers. Can't wait. BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. BetOnline, where the game starts. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. All right, the top 3. We're not going to waste any time here. Let's get into my number 3. And number 3 is going to be the original best comeback in Clipper history. And that is versus the Memphis Grizzlies in 2012 at the FedEx Forum in Memphis. And there's a reason why this comeback is better than the Warriors one. And I stand on this strong. It may not be better in terms of more impressive. It probably wasn't because the Warriors team was just another level. But it meant more. And I'll tell you why. Because this was the first season of Lob City. And the Clippers actually had some expectations. Dreamers were saying they can go to the championship in their first year. I never believed that. Most logical folks, I don't think believe that either, especially with a rising Oklahoma City who had just made the conference finals. And you obviously had still Kobe Bryant and the Lakers, but mainly the Spurs. And you also had the Memphis Grizzlies, who in the previous season had beaten the number 1 seeded San Antonio Spurs, albeit without Manu Ginobili. But the Grizzlies had a little excuse of their own. They didn't have Rudy Gay, who was their best scorer, and they still took the Oklahoma City Thunder to 7 games in the second round. So I remember the entire offseason, in the entire regular season too, it was Rudy Gay's back. So now they have Rudy Gay, Marc Gasol, Zebo, Tony Allen, and Mike Conley, and OJ Mayo coming off the bench. And I remember Charles Barkley all year saying nobody wants to play the Grizzlies in the playoffs. And I was really behind that take. I wanted to avoid them at all costs because I wanted a matchup in the first round where I felt the Clippers actually had a chance to maybe win. All I wanted to see as a fan that season was the Clippers get to the playoffs again. And they did that with flying colors, 40-26. But when we got matched up against the Grizzlies, I didn't think we were really going to win. I thought there was a chance, a good one. It was very 50-50. But I still felt that they had more experience having been to the playoffs the previous year. And obviously having Rudy Gay. And remember, the Clippers had lost Chauncey Billups to a torn Achilles, so Randy Foye was starting at the 2. And in that game 1, mind you, the last time the Clippers made the playoffs, I was 7 years old. So all my Clipper fandom was basically no good Clipper teams. No team that won more than 32 games. Well, in 2007, the Clippers won 40 games. So after 2007, it was just losing season after losing season. My heart was pounding like you wouldn't believe in that game, watching that game 1 in 2012. I mean, I was so nervous. And I remember I was so nervous that when the Clippers were down by 20 plus in the first half, I just started crying. I was like, we can't hang. It was the classic game 1 overreaction. I'm like 12 years old. I'm like, we can't hang with these guys. We're just not ready for this. The half-court playoffs, the game slows down. We're just not ready for it. And, man, I remember the Clippers are down 95-71. And I'm telling my parents, like, hopefully we can just make it respectable, go into game 2 with some momentum. I remember Eric Bledsoe made a corner jumper, cut the game down 94-82. And I remember thinking, well, 12, 13 points doesn't look that bad. And then we all know what happens next. Nick Young. 3 consecutive threes, the first in the left corner, the 2 in the right corner that looked like carbon copies of the other from Chris Paul to make it 96-93. The famous words from the commentator Dick Stockton that I'll never forget. And the Clippers making a run of it down by 6. Oh my God. Chills, guys, talking about it now. But I'll never forget, I think it was Blake that made the layup to give us the lead, and then Chris Paul made 2 free throws to give us the 99-98 lead, which would be the final score when Rudy Gay isolated at the top of the key. I still can't believe he didn't go quick. Still can't believe it. And he misses the pull-up over Kenyon Martin, and I just couldn't believe the Clippers came back. For example, in that Warriors game, I had a feeling that there was a small chance because the Clippers had made so many comebacks that season in various ways, and I had seen the Clippers make 2 huge playoff comebacks in my time as a fan now. The second one, which will be in my honorable mention, of course. Don't think I forgot about it. But I had seen big comebacks before. I had seen this Memphis one, so I thought anything was possible. And plus, you have to remember, in 2019, the volatility and volume of the three-point shot changed basketball. So comebacks were much more frequent. And I knew the Warriors could get complacent because that's what hurt them against the Houston Rockets in that 2018 series. I mean, you got to give the Rockets credit. They were actually a real threat to beat them, unlike the Clippers. But I think the main reason that series went far was partially in Andre Iguodala being injured before Chris Paul's injury, and then them getting complacent, and then obviously just falling into the iso ball trap. But a lot of complacency. I thought when the Warriors were locked in and moving the ball, they looked much better than the Rockets, and it was the same against the Clippers. Much more though complacency in those games, because when they wanted to turn up on the Clippers, they did. But that Memphis one, the 3-point shot was not like that yet, and the Grizzlies were such a great defensive team. So for the Clippers to just take the life out of the building the way that they did, it was unbelievable. 27 points down, 35-13 in the fourth quarter in favor of the Clippers. Nick Young had 19 points and was the highest scorer for the Clippers that game. 6 for 9 from the field and 3 for 4 from 3. It was a gritty game. 7 points and 13 rebounds, by the way, for the original Reggie chants. Reggie Evans. The reason why I busted out the Reggie chant in Game 7 against the Mavs in 2021 at Staples Center was because I had seen Clipper fans do it before with Reggie Evans. It didn't come out of nowhere. And, man, what a guy. One of the greatest, maybe the best offensive rebounder I've ever seen. But coming up, the final 2, the top 2. I think you guys know what they are. I think you guys know what they are, but I'm also going to be telling you guys your favorite games that just missed the cut. Coming up. Okay, everybody, the grand finale. Let's first talk about the games that just missed the cut. First, the first home Clipper playoff win in their time in Los Angeles, 1993 Western Conference first round against Hakeem Olajuwon and the soon-to-be the following year NBA champions, Houston Rockets, at the Sports Arena. The Clippers won it 93-90. Scott Brooks missed the three-pointer at the end of the game to try to tie the game. Yes, Scott Brooks, that one that ends up coaching. And the Clippers winning at home first time. Danny Manning, 19 points. Stanley Roberts, 20 and 13. That's 13 rebounds. And Mark Jackson, 8 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists. Ron Harper with 21 points. I had to include that one. First playoff win. I had to have a 90s game in there with Larry Brown coaching the team. And then, oh, guys, this was the hardest one. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go with this one first. 2021, Game 5 versus the Jazz. You just hear the news that Kawhi Leonard has an injury and is probably going to miss the rest of the series and maybe the rest of the playoffs. And you just think that the second round curse continues. That's what the first thing that came to my mind. The second round curse continues. The basketball gods do not want the Clippers to make it out of the second round. But boy, was I wrong. Utah, historically, has always been one of the hardest places to play in NBA history. Not just now, history. And the Clippers, who had just lost 2 games in there in that stadium with Kawhi, now go in there without Kawhi and win the game. And I just remember, obviously this is much more recent, but the Jazz just falling in love with that 3-ball. They had shot the most threes, and I'm pretty sure made the most threes all season, and just chucked themselves out of it. And the Clippers just played very smart basketball and finally got the performance from Marcus Morris Sr. that we'd been calling for as fans that whole playoffs. 25 points from Marcus Morris Sr. in Game 5. And, I mean, he was due, right? 10 for 16 from the field, 3 for 4 from deep. And Reggie Jackson also had 22 points. He was big time. 8 for 15 from the field and 3 for 8 from deep. But I would be not telling the story if I didn't talk about the man who just went to another level and got us there. And that was Paul George. Just one of the best games of his career. After the Game 6 that he had against the Jazz in 2018, probably his worst playoff game, at least definitely if you don't count the bubble, his worst playoff game, that elimination game was just awful, shot so poorly from the field. For him to come in and lead the team like that, no Russell Westbrook, no Kawhi, and have 37 points, 16 rebounds, and 5 assists on 12 of 22 shooting, that's 54.5%, guys. And had 7 points in the fourth quarter. I mean, you knew when the Clippers won that game. Now, I was not sure we were going to win the series. Absolutely not. But I just felt, wow, I have a chance to go to a game in 2 days' time and finally get a chance to see us actually have a chance to close this thing out. Because I didn't go to the 2015 collapse Game 6 against the Rockets. And I always regretted that I wasn't at the game to at least try to scream, do something. You know, you feel so helpless at home. Even though you're still helpless at the game to an extent, you got to at least try to get the noise. You can try to affect the atmosphere. And just the fact that the Clippers would have the opportunity to win a playoff, to break the second round curse thing at home and not be able to see it, with finally them letting fans back in. I mean, I'm doing a little bit too much foreshadowing here right now, but Game 5 is in there in the honorable mention, just didn't make the cut. And then another one, 24-point comeback against the Oklahoma City Thunder in 2014. I was at that game as well. It was on a Sunday afternoon. Darren Collison and Jamal Crawford were absolutely spectacular. And for whatever reason, I felt the Clippers were going to make a push in that game. The Thunder were just up by too much too early, and the Clippers just needed to get into their groove, and then the crowd really got loud. But Darren Collison had 12 points in the fourth quarter. Jamal Crawford had 7 points in the fourth quarter, and Blake had 10, and Chris had 8 in the fourth quarter. That's a good one as well. Darren Collison and Jamal Crawford with 18 apiece. Fun one. But Clippers didn't win the series, so I can't put it in the top 5 for me. And then the other one, the last honorable mention, actually no, second to last, Game 7 at Memphis. That same series where we had the comeback, the Clippers almost blew a 3-1 lead. And nobody talks about this anymore. Clippers almost blew a 3-1 lead. Lost Game 6 at home, where they should have closed out the series, going back to Memphis with all the momentum their way. And it was just a gritty, grinded out Sunday afternoon game. And you figured that favors the Grizzlies, but no, they just could not make shots. Zach Randolph and OJ Mayo and Mike Conley were just abysmal. Mike Conley 2 for 13, Zach Randolph 3 for 12, and OJ Mayo 1 for 11. Clippers won at 82-72, and I remember the main takeaway from that was the Clipper bench. The Grizzlies only got 11 points from their bench. Clippers, 41. 11 points from Kenyon Martin alone. 11 and 10 from Kmart. God, he was so great. Nick Young, 13 points. Just a deep Clipper team. And obviously Mo Williams was awesome. He had 9 points on 4 of 9 shooting. So that's one of them. And then the biggest snub of them all that I had a really hard time leaving out. Like really hard. Game 7 against the Warriors in 2014. That was just... I was in the building that night in the 300 section. That was just an electric night because we had just lost to the Grizzlies in the previous year, and it was so disappointing to go from going to the second round in 2012, beating Memphis, to losing to the exact same team the following year. I really hated Memphis. I still don't like them. They were my least favorite team. And then the Warriors were not that far behind, even though they were more likable, but they didn't like us, and we didn't really like them. Or the Clippers didn't really like them. And that was an electric night, especially given what had just happened with the Donald Sterling thing. I was at Game 5 as well, and that was a very intense night. Just the tension in the building. And Game 7 was just, can we get through this series? Can they get through this series? And it was neck to neck the whole way. Matt Barnes and JJ Redick made some really big shots in that game. And, Redick was 7 for 13 at 20 points. Matt Barnes was 5 for 8 at 13 points, and I remember him swinging his fist to the crowd. Matt Barnes was really good at that, getting the crowd involved. And Jamal Crawford had 22 points as well. And then, of course, Blake Griffin's and one, and the somersault after under the basket. DeAndre Jordan's putback, dunk, 126-121. Clippers beat the Warriors and got to the second round again. And I remember, I'll never forget, even though I'm not his biggest fan, Glenn Rivers swinging his fist and just letting all the emotion out of the last 2 weeks after what had just occurred. And it was special. The crowd was roaring. And now here we go. You've stayed this long. The final 2. And number 2, another game I was at, 2015 Game 7 against the Spurs. The defending champion Spurs, you don't think the Clippers are going to win going into the series. They're down 3-2. Going back to San Antonio and find a way to get the job done. And then Game 7, it was just neck to neck the whole game. And the intense, guys, I was at this game. It was so... Every possession felt like the fourth quarter. And every three or every big play, especially in the second half, every 3 in the second half felt like a bomb went off in the stadium. It was just unreal. A sea of red. God, we have to bring back the red. The image of the crowd in red back in the Lob City days was just unbelievable. I miss that. And Chris Paul goes out with the hamstring injury. And you know what's weird? Chris was such a fighter in terms of playing through injuries with the Clippers that I knew he was going to come back in the game. And he just willed the Clippers to win. And that's why, say whatever you want about him now, but that was Chris Paul, like that memory, it's just memories. Like I'm going to be able to tell kids 20, 30 years from now about that experience. And he'll always have given me that. And that was very special. And at the time when Chris made that game winner, mind you, that's one of the only game winners in Game 7 history. Take it from me, who's done his homework. Sam Jones from the Boston Celtics made a game winner in 1962 in Game 7. That's on video. Mario Elie had the kiss of death in 95 against the Suns. Kawhi Leonard had the game winner against the Philadelphia 76ers in Game 7. And Chris Paul had that shot against San Antonio. If there's another Game 7 that you know about a game winner under 10 seconds, please let me know. But, I mean, it was unbelievable. I still have that video on my Instagram of Chris Paul making that shot, even though I almost dropped my phone when the ball went through the hoop. And then let me not forget Blake Griffin, who was 24, 13, and 10 that game. Triple-double. 24 points, 13 rebounds, 10 assists on 7 for 14 shooting. And Chris Paul, 27 points and 6 assists on 9 for 13 shooting. And maybe the most impressive one, 5 for 6 from deep. He was just unreal. And what was so un-Clipper-like about this game was that it seemed like every single time the Clippers needed a big play, they'd make it, which is so un-Clipper-like. JJ Redick and Matt Barnes made so many big shots, and I'll never forget Matt Barnes waving the towel on the bench, just trying to get the crowd hyped. Like, it was so intense, and it was one of the best nights I had, but we don't want to talk about what happens after because that gets you depressed. I really thought the Clippers were going to go to the conference finals for sure after that night, for sure. And now, number one, was there ever a doubt? Was there ever a doubt? The curse breaker game. 2021, June 18th, Game 6 against the Jazz, a sea of blue. The first game where Staples Center was opened up to 90% capacity. I felt this could be the one, but it was going to take something miraculous. Another amazing game from Paul George. And little did I know, as great as Paul George would play, it wasn't going to be his night. I always said, my whole life as a Clipper fan, it was going to take a Herculean effort to win Game 6. To get out of the second round. It was going to take something out of the ordinary for the Clippers to do this. And, it was. A 25-point comeback. I mean, that has become, it used to be the Clippers were the team that blew leads. But if you really think about this podcast from back in 2012, ever since then, ever since that night against Memphis, we've had our fair share of big comebacks. And when there's nothing like feeling like you can influence a game. And 2015 against the Spurs and 2021 against the Jazz, I really felt like I was part of the game. As corny as it sounds, I really felt like I was affecting the game. Me as in being part of the crowd. And it was just, I mean, there's not the out of the ordinary performance was Terrence Mann, obviously. I mean, are you kidding me? I struggle to even find the words, but I was thinking in the first half, down 25. Okay, look, it was a great fight. We'll maybe make a push in the second half, but will we actually win? If we don't, we go back and lose in Utah, and it's gonna be a little disappointing. But the pressure's on the Jazz. We don't have Kawhi Leonard, but man, oh man. Again, the Utah Jazz falling into that trap, taking way too many threes. Clippers go small ball, switch everything. Rudy Gobert doesn't take advantage of his size on offense. And Terrence Mann makes 3 after 3. Rudy Gobert starts guarding Terrence, starts helping on the weak perimeter defenders of Utah who are getting blown by for fun. Reggie Jackson, Paul George driving and kicking. And oh man, those left corner threes that Terrence Mann was hitting in that second half. Again, same thing as 2015, bombs going off in the stadium. I mean, that whole run in that second half, everyone in the lower bowl was on their feet. It's those moments that just make you, they're beyond words as a sports fan. As somebody like myself who cares so much, I remember I was jumping on the Staples Center, like on the railing. Like I had an aisle seat and I was straight on the threes. Like when Patrick Beverley made those threes, I was jumping and hopping on the railing. Like it was just mayhem. I mean, that's not even just one of the greatest nights. That's not just the greatest night in Clipper history. Like I consider that the second best day of my life. Like it was just unbelievable. After my acceptance, my transfer acceptance to UMass, that's another story for another day, but that was the second best day of my life, straight up. And I know that sounds so cringy because it's just a second round. But again, if you're not a Clipper fan, you just don't get it. And oh man, I mean, also being at that game, I mean, come on. I'd waited for that moment my whole life. It felt like we had uplifted the curse. Paul George was he led by example. Terrence Mann, 39 points. 7 of 10 from deep. And then, of course, Paul George, 28 points, 9 rebounds, and 7 assists. He was just unbelievable. 131 to 119. A night Clipper fans will remember for the rest of their lives. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Some of those games I named tonight are getting knocked off the list because guess what? Guess what? There's going to be more this season when the Clippers win the championship. And to support the Clippers and follow the Clippers' whole run going to the championship and winning it, fingers crossed, you got to be joining us here on joining me here on Locked On Clippers. Make sure you subscribe. If you want to find me individually, you can find me at Dime Dropper Pod on Twitter and Instagram and Dime Dropper on YouTube. Going live post-game, after Clipper games, directly, raw emotion from a diehard fan, as you can tell by listening to this episode. And, of course, subscribe to Locked On Clippers. And make sure to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And remember to give us feedback as well and answer today's question. What's your top 5 favorite best Clipper games in history? Let me know. Have a great day, everybody. And go Clippers.